Beirut, Lebanon, August the 4th, 2020. It's a sweltering day in this ancient Mediterranean city, which is home to 2.2 million people. The nation is suffering its worst crisis since the end of the Civil War, which lasted from 1975 to 1990. Without any economic reform by the new government, the Lebanese pound is collapsing and fresh groceries are hard to come by as the COVID-19 pandemic sweeps across the country. Towards evening, a fire breaks out in a warehouse in the port.
I have lived through the war in Lebanon, and this was a different sound. So my first reaction was to jump and try to hide. But I didn't have time to reach a place where I could be safe. That the second blast exploded, and that was when all of the glass fell on us like, I don't know, like bullets of glass.
Yeah, well, the funny part is that, so I wasn't wearing any glasses because I usually don't, but so this wound on this side was like this. So it reached here and was pretty deep, and it got the eye. The eye was really all out, apparently, from what I understood, after they had to kind of sew it back in.
The explosion on August the 4th is so massive that it can be heard in Cyprus and is registered as an earthquake in the United States. The city is devastated. The final death toll reaches more than 200, with thousands more wounded or homeless. This is the port of Beirut, the busiest port in the eastern Mediterranean and a gateway to the Middle East. In the year before the explosion, it handled 1.2 million standard containers per year. Like many ports, it was also a hub for illegal trade and corruption. The fire broke out shortly before 5:40 p.m. local time. The fire brigade was called 4 minutes later. Platoon 5 of the nearest fire station made its way to the scene. They were told a consignment of fireworks had exploded. Shabel Karam was in charge of the platoon, which included his brother-in-law and 27-year-old paramedic Sahar Fares, who was engaged to be married in 2021. Gilbert Karan was Sahar's fiancé.
If you see Sahar in her uniform, you'll see she is delicate, an angel. Yes, she was an angel on earth, even when she was in uniform, but she had the courage of 100 men. Sahar completed one of the toughest training courses that exists. As I said, she was braver than me. She was afraid of nothing. There are videos of her team braving the storm, and there isn't a trace of fear in her face.
These images show the last moments of her life. In this photograph, we see the team desperately attempting to enter the warehouse, already engulfed in smoke and flames.
On the way to the fire, Sahar sent me a video message to say goodbye. She was sitting on the center seat of the vehicle waving. I asked her what was going on, and she gestured with her finger that she'd call me later. When she got to the port, she video called me again and showed me the warehouse that was burning. I asked her, "Why don't you have your mask?" And she said, "I've got it with me, darling."
7 minutes later, there was an explosion in the southern part of the building.
I video called her again at 6:07 p.m., but Sahar wasn't looking at me because she was watching the sky while holding her phone. and I asked her whether there was something wrong, and I shouted, "Sahar, answer me." She was looking into the phone, and I said, "If there's something wrong, run, run." I saw that she wasn't running fast enough and was shaking her head. She was scared. 5 or 6 seconds later, there was this explosion.
A secret stock of ammonium nitrate had just exploded, devastating eastern Beirut. In the aftermath of one of the largest explosions ever to hit a capital city, life is slowly returning to the devastated streets of Beirut. The city saw destruction on an enormous scale during the civil war of the 1980s, and thousands were killed. A peace agreement between the growing Muslim population and the Christian elites finally ended the war. But this destruction was caused by the explosion of a huge shipment of ammonium nitrate that came to Lebanon on a mysterious ship, supposedly heading for an explosives factory in distant Mozambique.
Few hours after the explosion took place, news started coming that it was because 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate were stored in the warehouse number 12 in Beirut port. And everybody was interested in knowing why those ammonium nitrate shipment, why this ammonium nitrate shipment was kept all this time in Beirut port.
The ship had stopped in Beirut to pick up an extra cargo to pay for its passage through the Suez Canal. The busiest port of Beirut is located near Gemese, the political and commercial centre of the densely populated city. This is where the cargo ship MV Rosus, owned by a Russian entrepreneur, had docked on November 21st, 2013. The story of the ship is shrouded in fraud and cover-up. Firas Hatoum is an investigative journalist who revealed the shady web of operations surrounding the lethal cargo.
In all this story, you find everywhere you find 2 or 3 layers. For every person, for every entity, for every step, there is always a company behind a company, a person behind a person. So are all those circumstances happening by coincidence? I have my doubts, actually.
The investigation sought to discover who owned the ship and where it was going. The ship was officially owned by Russian Igor Grashushkin, who claims he merely leased it from the original owner of the Greek Cypriot shipping magnate Charalambos Manoli, who not only supplied him the ship but also provided seaworthiness certificates issued in Moldavia.
The Lebanese authorities saying that Igor Grashushkin is the real owner. Then we discovered that 6 or 7 months maybe before the shipment, Igor decided to be the operator of the ship. The weird thing was why Igor's name came in, because for everyone other than the Lebanese authorities and the people who have the documents about this shipment, it was Charalambos Manoli all the time who was the owner.
As Firas Hatoum's incriminating paper trail shows, Igor Grashushkin declared bankruptcy while the ship was in port. According to the captain, the heavy equipment had damaged the ship's cargo hatches, making it unseaworthy. The captain was nervous about the state of the ship and its dangerous cargo, but was trapped aboard the rust bucket stuck in Beirut, perhaps not by chance.
If somebody paid the amount of almost maybe $400,000 or $500,000 to buy this ammonium nitrate shipment, is it logical that he doesn't have, or he did not keep in mind that he needs some money to move through the Suez Canal and carry on to Mozambique? It's like, for example, traveling from here maybe to USA, and then after doing that, you remember that you don't have enough money to go from the airport by taxi to the hotel. You can't do the big part and forget about the small part. It's illogical.
The deadly cargo was unloaded into Warehouse 12, which once stood on the site of this 40-metre deep crater, right in front of the grain silos that have become symbolic of the massive explosion.
Certain letters were sent for judges here in Lebanon telling them that from people in the port who are, or the people who are in charge of the port, telling the judges, give us approval to remove the ammonium nitrate from the ship because the ship will sink at any time. It's not seaworthy. So they got an approval from the judge. I don't know if the judge knew about the danger of this material or no. The letter was written in a way to make him believe that there is a real danger if the ammonium nitrate stayed in ship. He believed what was written for him, and he approved the removal of the ammonium nitrate from the ship, and it was put in the warehouse number 12.
In his investigation into the case, Firas found that customs officials sent at least 5 letters to the government asking for advice as to how to handle the cargo, with no reply.
Is that in 2017, an expert which was asked to go and check the warehouse and check how many bags are left from the ammonium nitrate. She said that what is available or useful is not more than, at that time, 900 tons of ammonium nitrate. How did they remove it? I personally don't have any answer, but of course that could not have been done without key people in the port and maybe outside the port knowing this.
Neither the broker nor the client attempted to recover the valuable cargo. The Lebanese army refused to take charge of it, so it sat in the warehouse, a silent, deadly ticking time bomb.
Or the authorities who are responsible more than other authorities, I can tell you that it's the army in this case, because this is a sensitive material, this is an explosive material, and it's clear in the law, in the Lebanese law, that such a material, when it comes to Lebanon for one reason or another, especially that it was not coming to stay, it was supposedly coming to as a transit, and for one reason or another it was kept in Lebanon, the army should have taken responsibility. That, of course, doesn't mean that other authorities are not responsible, because everybody could have done more.
The state of the warehouse itself was the source of particular concern. Captain Joseph Nadaf sent several reports to the highest authorities in the year preceding the blast, but ironically, he was arrested after the explosion for allegedly approving the storage of the explosives in the port. Years before, he was employed there. He says the charges are false, and instead of being hailed as a whistleblower, he's being made a scapegoat. Halim Nadaf is his uncle.
The Agency for State Security appointed Captain Joseph Nadaf to take over the Port Authority in 2019 with the remit to fight corruption. One day around October, someone went to tell Captain Nadaf about the ammonium nitrate stock held in Warehouse 12, and this was around the end of 2019. He investigated and searched for information on the issue. Captain Nadaf did not have many men in the port. He had a staff of 10 soldiers and could only use one for investigations.
Next to the decaying bags of explosives were other extremely flammable materials: boxes of fireworks, ammonium phosphate, and tyres. It was just a matter of time before this lethal mix blew up.
He investigated the issue and sent his first report on the 6th of December 2019. That's 8 months before the explosion. In it, he said that there was a stock of ammonium nitrate in Warehouse 12 that was dangerous. that it could be stolen to make explosives, and that if it caught fire, it could destroy the port of Beirut. We're talking about 8 months before the explosion in the port of Beirut.
The fire started at the northern end of the warehouse. The smoke changed from white to black. Then a crackling sound was followed by a first explosion. Whatever caused the detonation of ammonium nitrate, the second red-coloured explosion shot debris and heat into the air, sucking oxygen out of the surrounding atmosphere and then, suddenly, releasing a shock wave, just like an atomic bomb. The effect of the explosion was the equivalent of 1.1 kilotons of TNT, the largest non-nuclear explosion of all time. It was registered as an earthquake at 4.3 on the Richter scale in Jordan and heard as far away as Cyprus.
I was like on all fours, just, and I could hear Danny shouting, "Where are you?" It's like, so very quickly she came over. She saw that I was really hurt. And I guess she must have seen it. I don't know, because I couldn't see what was happening. There was a lot of blood. I was really spewing a lot of blood. And she came with a wet towel to start cleaning a little bit. But the pain was really too sharp.
St George's Hospital was in direct line of sight of the blast. These terrifying images recorded by CCTV cameras at the St George's Hospital overlooking the port explain the high number of victims. The shock wave smashed windows and furniture, ripped down walls and ceilings. Miraculously, 26-year-old paediatric nurse Pamela Zennoon managed to save 3 newborn babies from their incubators.
I was sitting here with the babies. I did my rounds, I finished my rounds. And then I was talking to my mother on the phone just to tell her that my day was doing very well, and the blast happened. Okay, everything fell down on the floor, the ceilings fell down on us. So I was knocked out for a few seconds. And then I woke up, just made sure I was okay. I could move my hands and legs. And then directly I thought of the babies. They were present in this room and in the other room. They were 5 babies. I was able to grab 3 of them, and the nurses that were with me were able to grab 2 of them and give them to the residents because they were severely injured. And I was able to go down the stairs to get them to safety.
The fire and ambulance services were quickly overwhelmed. A nightmare scenario evolved in which a huge fire raged over the port area while panicked civilians called the emergency services from the streets and their destroyed apartments.
I went from this hospital to 2 other hospitals. I wasn't able to get admitted because these hospitals were also in ruins. So I had to walk around 5 kilometers to reach another hospital with the 3 babies and put these 3 babies in another hospital.
I made sure my kids were okay, and I drove to my sister's house, which was not very far from where I was when the bomb exploded, but I was driving on glass. It was like a rug of glass, broken glass everywhere. And so the car was not moving correctly, but it was okay. I arrived there, and my son had arrived just before me. And when I got there, I saw they were bringing down the cleaning lady. My son had brought her in like a blanket. They were carrying her because there were no ambulances, no elevators, nothing. 8 floors down.
We actually found help all the way.
Yeah.
That was really the most heartwarming kind of part of that evening. So when we found out that the first hospital was inoperable, we thought of another one that is, like 2 kilometers walk. And in my condition, obviously, it wasn't easy. So we walked up to a parallel street, and there was a traffic jam, actually, going towards where we wanted to go. And this guy on a moped, like a delivery guy probably, came up to us and he says, "Hop in." And he drove us zigzagging amongst the debris, and he got us to that second hospital.
The cleaning lady, she was actually the lady who took care of my father. And my father passed away 9 months before the blast. And she decided to stay 1 year longer because she had to pay her daughter's school and school year. And she said, I would like to stay 1 more year with you. So she stayed between me and my sisters, each one of us. She was moving around unfortunately, 3 days later, after the blast, she was very severely injured, and she passed away from the wounds she had on her head and body.
The death toll was rising by the minute, reaching more than 200, with 6,500 people injured. The city's infrastructure was devastated, and Platoon 5's fire station was also destroyed. Hospitals and police stations were abandoned. The explosion plunged the war-ravaged nation into the ultimate catastrophe. 300,000 people were left homeless. But how exactly did the ammonium nitrate explode? The cause of the fire that triggered the explosion is still unclear, but the images of its early stages show smoke coming from the warehouse. Witnesses reported hearing strange sounds near the area, fueling suspicions of a possible missile or drone strike. These images show what the firefighters saw. Pyrotechnics in Warehouse 12. These are the last moments of their lives. "30 seconds after the fireworks, the ammonium nitrate exploded. The chemical reaction that causes such an explosion involves the rapid decomposition of the ammonium nitrate into its composite parts: ammonium oxide with its characteristic red vapour and water. The release of energy, manifested as a shockwave, is immense. It may never come to light who is to blame for the explosion of the huge ammonium nitrate stock in Beirut port on August 4, 2020. But a pall of suspicion does fall on the successive governments of Lebanon. In 2020, the new Prime Minister Hassan Diab and President Michel Aoun received warnings from the General Directorate of State Security about the state of the explosives. And in July 2020, the Supreme Defence Council sent its report to the Minister for Public Works, Michel Najjar. Yet nothing was done. Surely incompetence cannot be the only explanation for the disaster. In his months-long investigation, journalist Firas Hatoum has taken a critical look at the original deal between the Mozambique explosives factory and the ammonium nitrate producers in Georgia.
When I talked to the factory in Mozambique, their answers were not convincing for me. And they told me that we have nothing to do with this shipment. We just ordered 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate from a company called Savaro. That's all what we know. So I told them, okay, what's this company? Do you know with whom you were dealing? Who was the person you were calling? Do you have any emails? They refused to give all this information. So the presence of a middle company, before knowing that it's a shell company, raised question marks in my approach to the story. Because why shall a factory, a big factory in Mozambique, deal with another factory through a middle company?
The proximity to one of the world's longest-running wars, as well as the arms embargo imposed on the Syrian regime, may have tempted friends of Syria to remove some of the powerful explosives for use in bombs. But so far, no evidence has been found linking the explosives to terrorist groups or Hezbollah.
I tried to find all the shell companies that were in 2013 registered on the same address as Savaro. There were around 70 at that time. Yeah, all of them, they were shell companies, just like Savaro. No real activity, no people with real business activity in charge of them, just front people. The only company I found sharing the same address with Savaro and with real business activity was a company called HESCO Engineering and Construction. HESCO Engineering and Construction was owned by George Haswani at that time. And George Haswani is a Syrian businessman who got sanctioned in 2014 for trying to help the Syrian regime. That's what the Americans accused him of.
The ownership of the vessel is not clear. First owned by frontmen, then bought by a bank with close ties to Syrian businessmen. It is now subject to an FBI investigation.
They were all big clients in a bank called FBME. This bank was later on sanctioned also by the Americans for money laundering, okay? And in this bank, where they have lots of accounts and where they used to move lots of, they used to move money all the time from Russia and to Britain, and from Britain to Cyprus. In this bank is the same bank that gave Karalombos Manoli, who seems to be the real owner of Rosos, because in the beginning they said that the owner is a Russian guy called Igor Greshishkin, and then it seems that Igor was just the person who was the operator of the ship, but Karalombos was the real owner, Karalombos Manoli. So Karalombos Manoli took a mysterious loan from FBME at the end of 2011. That's almost 1 year or 1 year and a half before the shipment.
These dirty dealings led to the blast that killed more than 200 people, injured 6,000, destroyed 70,000 homes and buildings, left 300,000 homeless. It also sank 6 ships. Nearly a year after the tragedy, omissions and cover-ups to the investigation are fueling concerns that the truth may never be fully revealed, despite the courageous efforts of investigative journalists. Once again, the Lebanese are rebuilding their nation after a futile and deadly tragedy. This may be Lebanon's darkest hour, but there is hope buried beneath the rubble. Hundreds of young Lebanese have returned to Beirut, or have decided to stay instead of going abroad, to help clean up and begin building a new, more promising future for a city that must once again rise from the ashes.